Turn A Gundam.
By the turn of the millennium, Gundam was already an established franchise with a main storyline that started more or less 20 years before with the original Mobile Suit Gundam, but also newer spin-offs that kept the same themes but explored them in very different angles and totally different settings. Mr. Yoshiyuki Tomino tried to end Gundam with victory, yet immediately after that series, G-Fighter came out, and even though it was widely experimental and completely the opposite of all previous Gundam installments, the franchise resisted and kept moving forward. After that, Gundam Wing was released and it proved to be immensely popular. Not only were the characters super unforgettable, for better or worse,
I'll kill you.
but the mechanical design was absolutely iconic and colorful and a complete change from the campy designs of G-Fighter and the more blocky aesthetic from Universal Century. And let's not forget about the scene with the Wing Gundam unfolding its wings in space from endless waltz. An instant classic if you ask me. Anyway, then came After War Gundam X to much less fanfare, but the mecha genre panorama had already changed immensely thanks to the revolutionary Neon Genesis Evangelion. The millennium was starting to approach its end and Tomino, the grandfather of Gundam, was nowhere to be found. Close to half a decade had to pass for Mr. Killemall to finally get over his disgust for Gundam and, more importantly, his ongoing depression. And just a year shy from the close of the century, in 1999, Turn A Gundam saw the light. A series created for the Gundam Big Bang 20th anniversary celebration and the 8th installment in the Gundam franchise that marked the triumphant return of Tomino. Let's fast forward to a 2009 interview with Anime News Network where Tomino stated that he created Turn A Gundam as a means of affirmatively accepting all of the Gundam series. This is made very clear by him using the "for all" mathematical symbols in the series title, the turned A symbol that appears in many logic propositions representing universal quantification. Now, this is absolutely clever as it is perverse. You see, Turn A Gundam can also mean "for all Gundam." And from a franchise celebration perspective, it's great, like hooray for all Gundam that came before and for all Gundam that will come after. And yeah, it works. But knowing what happens in the series, what represents the concept of the dark history, and what's the true purpose of the machine named Turn A Gundam, For All Gundam can also be interpreted as Tomino's manifesto that Gundam started with him and will end with him. It doesn't matter what happens in between. For all Gundam, he is the Alpha and the Omega. I really don't know if he meant it that way, but if so, it's absolutely brilliant. Not only did he manage to tell a great story that completely defied how a Gundam was supposed to look, but that same story is also a commentary of the whole franchise's tendency to repeat itself using the same elements, albeit in different angles and colors. And the cherry on top of the cake is that no matter what, just as he was there in the beginning, he will be there at the end of the franchise. Maybe not him, but his creation, the Turn A Gundam. In story, the Turn A Gundam is the executioner of every iteration of every world of every Gundam. And that, my friends, that's a powerful statement from the legendary mad genius Yoshiyuki Kill 'Em All Tomino. So, without further ado, I'm Absa, and it's time now to explore the wonderfully bizarre world of Turn A Gundam, a series that marked the first non-Japanese designed Gundam and the return of Tomino. I'll first talk a little bit about the story and the mechanical designs, and then about the mysterious period known as the Dark History and how it can be interpreted as Tomino's acceptance and acknowledgement of a franchise that has outgrown its creator. And as per usual, spoilers ahead. The The story of Turn A Gundam has some parallels, or we can call them conceptual similarities, to Tomino's previous Gundam works. There are two major factions throughout the whole saga: the Earth people, who live in an era that closely resembles the steam-powered early 20th century, and the Moon people, or Moonrace, who want to return to Earth after millennia of living on the Moon. Loran Sehak is part of the Moonrace but pilots the Gundam in favor of the people of Earth, just like Amuro Ray was a space Noid that piloted the Gundam for the Earth Federation and the Earth Noids. Loran, also mirroring Amuro, accidentally falls into the Gundam and has to read the manual to learn to pilot it. Diana Sorail is the queen of the Moonrace, who has Harry Ord as head of the Royal Guard and as an advisor, and this more or less mimics a much more noble Haman Khan of Axis Sion and Char in his Quattro persona alongside her. Harry even pilots a golden mobile suit. Throughout the series, we can also see a lot of mobile suits pertaining to other eras, particularly the Bojarnon, a definitely not Saku that was dug up from unexplored areas. There are a couple of more as we approach the dark history, but I'll get to it later. Set in the year correct century 2345, this series tells the saga of the war between the Moonrace, who wish to reestablish on Earth, and the Earth Militia forces, which use the ancient Turn A Gundam to stop them. Everything starts when the Moonrace sends three teenagers, Loran, Keith, and Fran, down to Earth on a reconnaissance mission to test the viability of its environment for their eventual return. This again mirrors the first Gundam episode ever, where three pilots, Slender, Jean, and Denim, enter Site 7 in their mobile suits to spy on the colony, but I said that I wasn't going to keep on comparing, so let's move on. A year passes and they successfully infiltrate Earthian life, with Loran getting a job as a driver for the prestigious Haim family. Along the way, he befriends Kihel and Soshi, the daughters of the Haim lineage, and here's where things start to get super interesting. Kihel looks exactly like the Queen of the Moon, Diana Sorel. During Sochi's coming-of-age ceremony, the Moonrace decide to attack, and due to that same upheaval, Loran and Sochi discover the White Doll amidst the ruins. And it's with that unknown machine that Loran somehow manages to pilot that they, to their best intentions, begin to defend the land. Very early on, the two sides of the conflict are introduced. The Earth Militia Alliance, with its low-tech armaments and the discovered mobile suit relics, and, on the other hand, the Moonrace, with their super advanced technology and hyper weird mechas. Because yes, this series has one of the weirdest mechanical designs ever, probably even weirder than Crossbone Gundam. The main reason behind this is because some of the designs were made by American artist Sid Med, marking the first time in the franchise's history that a non-Japanese artist designs the main Gundam. I don't know if there's another non-Japanese designed Gundam though. Anyway, the thing is that the Turn A, Turn X, and the Sumo are some of the weirdest, most outlandish Gundam designs ever, especially the Turn X. I have to say that I don't like them, but that doesn't mean that I consider them bad. In fact, they are quite iconic and helped broaden the design horizon of what a Gundam was expected to look like. The rest of the mechanical design, aside from the mobile suits that came from other shows, is equally weird, but overall matches the rounded and elongated and flat patterns of the Turn A. Again, I don't quite like it, but it works perfectly in this story. Speaking of the story, initially the conflict seems to be very simple: the Earth against the Moon. But by now we know that nothing is ever that easy with Tomino's storytelling. As the series progresses, everything gets much more nuanced and different sides emerge, alliances change, and by the end there are quite some sub-factions and a lot of infighting between the militia and the Moonrace. Another element that keeps the story moving forward is that at one point early on, Kihel and Diana switch places because they thought it would be fun. Yet, that change makes them live through experiences that normally they wouldn't have access. So, what started as a game slowly and gradually makes them learn about their surroundings. And since nobody seemed to catch on to them, they continued doing it for quite a while and learning more and more. I'm purposely omitting a lot of details of the story as the conflicts arise very organically throughout the series, and summarizing them wouldn't do them justice. In fact, how the conflict starts to escalate as more and more technology is unearthed and the people's ambition grows further is one of the most interesting parts of the whole series. What I'll do say is that we can more or less separate the whole story in 3 sagas. The Earth conflict, where the Moonrace is introduced and the Earthians unite to try to stop them, all while digging up more and more relics of the past. The Moon conflict and the discovery of the dark history, where the Earthians and the Moonrace travel to space and discover that given the absence of Diana, another royal family took over the throne. And finally, the duel of brothers Turn A and Turn X back on Earth, where we have Loran fighting against a very aggressive Moonrace general who wants to use both machines to his advantage. Now, something that stood out for me was the fact that through the whole series we see certain events that parallel and or subvert other important Gundam events. I already spoke about the 3 Moonrace teens that approached Earth and the accidental pilot of the Gundam. The other one that I noted was when the Turn A fired the nukes to the falling asteroid, which is something that we more or less already saw on Char's counterattack. But the one that really got me thinking was the depiction of the moonlight butterfly, a bright light that everyone could see that, for those who knew, brought terror to their minds. In Char's counterattack, the Axis shock is something that everyone on Earth and space could watch, and it somehow felt peaceful, like an aurora that signaled the end of conflict. But here in Turn A, that light means destruction on a scale never before seen. I'm talking extinction level destruction. A flash of light has always meant something in Gundam, from the sparks of the new types and the ignition of the beam sabers to even the glow of Amuro's new Gundam and the devastating wing attack of the V2. The first Gundam related thing that we ever saw was a rim light surrounding the Earth that then started to flash. I'm obviously talking about the opening. A couple of years later, the hopes of Space Noids and Earth Noids united in a warm green light that manifested a miracle with the Axis shock. But the moonlight butterfly signifies extinction. Yet, Loran chooses not to continue on with the conflict and escapes the light of destruction. And lo and behold, the world didn't shatter. Could this be Tomino's feelings about the franchise? Everything, and I do mean everything about Gundam, started with a flash of light. Time passed, and almost a decade later, he was at his most hopeful for the franchise with his movie. Yet, with the passing of the years, conflict arose, so much so that he wanted to destroy everything about Gundam with the super ironically titled series Gundam Victory. And finally, just at the turn of the millennium, he reconciled with the light and chose to stop the fighting and the destruction simply by walking away and leaving intact a legacy that burns bright and lights the way for others. I'm obviously not implying that Loran is a Tomino stand-in, just that in the final battle between the Turn A and the Turn X, the final confrontation between Jim and Loran chose to stop fighting by walking away from the conflict. With this, it's almost as if Tomino is telling us that adding more fuel to the flame is absolutely not going to stop the fire. Tomino is a crazy man with crazy ideas, a mad storyteller that at one point disowned his creation. But he returned with something super interesting where he explored different angles of the same war stories that he had been talking about for the past 2 decades. Turn A Gundam is Tomino's magnum opus where he finally reconciled with his creation, accepting the fact that it grew beyond the need of him. But this is Tomino that we're talking about. So before the series ended, he planted a story element that made every future Gundam tie back to his creation in a move so brilliant and so perverse that could only come from the man also known as Kill 'Em All Tomino. One of the greatest revelations of the Moon City arc is the fact that the Moonrace has an archive of the eras that came before the correct century. This whole period is called the Dark History, and even though they are not sure of how long it covers, it most likely spans for thousands of years. The other thing that they are sure about is that it started with a Turn A Gundam and its Moonlight Butterfly, a nanomachine barrage that dissolves all matter. Supposedly, many other eras have existed before the correct century, with Universal Century being only one of them. And this is very interesting since the way that the archive shows the previous eras is precisely with animation clips of other Gundam shows. But every story ended the same, with the Turn A Gundam spreading its wings and destroying everything. From a narrative perspective, this gives the Turn A super menacing background as the machine that heralds the end times. Yet it was used completely different by Loran and in fact stopped at the end. So yeah, the machine is just a tool, and just like a knife can be used to cut a potato, so can be used to kill a human. It's never about the Gundam and always about the pilot. Yet, on the other hand, in a more of a meta commentary, with the Dark History, Tomino is acknowledging that his creation will be forever stuck in a loop of different settings with the same type of plots. An eternal cycle of new wars and new robots is the destiny of his franchise. Keep in mind that by the start of Turn A Gundam, there had been 3 new Gundam timelines: Future Century, After Colony, and After War, with numerous expansions to Universal Century in the form of spin-offs. Also, by having a creation of his, the Turn A, be the executioner of every Gundam era or timeline, Tomino managed to position himself as the creator and the destroyer of Gundam. No matter what happens, everything started with him and will end with him, the Alpha and the Omega. This is super brutal, and I don't really know if it was intended this way, but it sounds very Tomino. Like, yeah, Sunrise, since you didn't allow me to kill Gundam with victory, I have returned with a show that plants a story idea that transcends your different timelines, bypasses your rules that they are not interconnected, and, at least metaphysically, it allows me to destroy the very franchise that you took away from me. I mean, that sounds a little bit like Tomino, at least the idea that I have of him. I was absolutely marveled by the idea of the Dark History and how it manages to create a sort of loose continuum of the whole Gundam franchise. It's sufficiently vague to not interfere with other stories, but sufficiently concrete to be acknowledged as a possible outcome at the end of times of every timeline. It was even used as a framing device for the Light of Life Chronicle, even though they changed a couple of things. Anyway, absolutely masterful move by Tomino. With Turn A Gundam, not only did he manage to unify the whole franchise, but also reroute it back to himself. And it was always right there in the name. Turn A Gundam, aka For All Gundam. All in all, Turn A Gundam is a weird story. It may not be for everyone since it's not the most flashy or bombastic nor the most dark and upsetting. Back in the day, it was probably a very big thing since it marked the return of Tomino. Yet, a couple of years later, he returned again and directed Reconquista NG, and right now he is working on those movies. Regarding the plot, you may probably already guessed it, but I was not that fond of the whole story. It's not that I didn't like it at all, since it does have great elements like the Dark History and the Moonlight Butterfly, but I think that it works better as a metatextual commentary of the franchise that happens to be told in the form of a new story. I can summarize my entire feelings about this story by telling you that I'm not building the Master Grade Turn A Gundam, even though I am trying to build every Master Grade from the Universal Century. So yeah, it's a nice story, but it's no Turn A Gundam. Oh, and by the way, do not try to watch the movies as they feel super rushed and no character seems fleshed out. Maybe it can work as a reminder of the highlights and to try and reframe the dark history as the cruel Tomino's thesis. Having said that, I'm very interested to hear what are your thoughts on this Gundam entry. Did you like it? Did you enjoy my reinterpretation of the story? Or, in fact, what are your thoughts of this story? Please leave it in the comments and I'll definitely try my best to answer them all. And as you may or may not know, my name is Absa, where you can continue the conversation over at Twitter, where you can follow me at Absalonicus, and on Instagram, where I post pictures of my figures, my cats, and sometimes even myself. I'll be trying to talk more about anime, comics, and mechanical design via model kits. Until next time, always remember that in fiction lies power, so let's use it to forge a new type of story, our hero's journey.